Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're going to explore the top news headlines for today, May 13th.
Yes, quite a range of stories to cover, from Nigeria to the global stage.
We'll try and give you a concise overview. Let's start in Nigeria. There's some worrying news from Borno State.
That's right. Reports are coming in that the suspected ISWAP fighters seem to have taken control of Marte local government area.
Taking control. How did that happen?
Well, it seems the Nigerian army abandoned its position there very early Sunday morning, around 3 a.m. after some coordinated attacks.
Abandon their posts. That sounds serious.
It does. And there are unconfirmed reports that some soldiers were captured. Many apparently deserted towards Dikwa.
Any word on casualties?
Not yet. The Nigerian Air Force has been seen overhead, but, details on casualties are still unknown at this point.
And Marte, that's quite a strategic spot in the Lake Chad area, right?
Absolutely. It's changed hands multiple times, unfortunately. This latest incident follows another attack, apparently by Boko Haram, just the night before on a task force battalion there.
Oh, really? So back-to-back attacks?
It seems so. In that Saturday attack, there were feared deaths, communication was lost with the base, and there were reports of armored tanks being burnt, ammunition stolen.
Wow. And this comes not long after that other attack where soldiers were killed in Malam Fatori.
Exactly. Just a few weeks after 22 soldiers, including a commander, lost their lives there. It really underscores the ongoing decade-long conflict in the Northeast.
A very difficult situation. Let's shift to governance. There's an update on that electoral fraud case involving Professor Peter Ogban.
Yes. The interesting thing is, although he was convicted for fraud during the 2019 election, and the Court of Appeal upheld his 3-year sentence back in April, he remains free.
He's still free, even after the appeal was denied.
Apparently so. The conviction was for manipulating results, specifically in favor of Godswill Akpabio in Akwa Ibom Northwest. He falsified scores in a Sin Udum local government area.
And the sentence was 3 years plus a fine.
Correct. 3 years imprisonment and a N$100,000 fine. He reportedly paid the fine for one count, but the jail time for the other count. Well, he hasn't served it.
So what's happening now?
His legal team has filed a new motion at the Supreme Court, this time asking for bail. Some are describing it as, well, a tactic to delay going to prison.
So more legal maneuvers. He'd already tried to appeal to the Supreme Court and suspend the sentence before, hadn't he?
Yes, exactly. He's acknowledged the conviction for manipulation and publishing false results. His appeal challenges the judgment on multiple grounds: vague charges, potential witness issues, lack of genuine results presented, flawed investigation, sentencing discretion. Quite a list.
But the bottom line is, despite the upheld sentence, he's not currently incarcerated.
That seems to be the case.
Okay. Let's move on to some arrests in Abuja involving Interpol.
Yes, some positive action on law enforcement here. Interpol, working with the Nigeria police force, arrested 2 individuals, Robert Harms, a Canadian national, and Ms. Okeke Ogichi Najaka, a Nigerian woman.
And what are the charges?
Fraud and cybercrimes. Harms was picked up at Abuja Airport back in February. He's accused of defrauding a company called Tepison Enterprises out of $210,000 US.
$200,000? How?
It was allegedly part of a fictitious waste-to-energy project scheme. The money was reportedly laundered to an account in Dubai.
And he's in custody now?
Yes, he was arraigned on May 9th and is currently in custody. His case is adjourned until May 20th.
And the Nigerian woman, Mrs. Daka?
She was actually rearrested on May 8th. She had apparently jumped bail from a 2020 cybercrime investigation.
Jumped bail? What was that original case about?
It involved allegations of cyberbullying, fraud, and disseminating nude images. She's due in court very soon, actually, Tuesday, May 13th.
And isn't there something about her NGO as well?
Yes. Her foundation, the Ogechi Helping Hands Foundation, is also being prosecuted separately. The allegation there is defrauding the public of over 452 million naira through a supposed medical assistance scam.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
It is. The Inspector General of Police has apparently emphasized a zero-tolerance stance on these types of crimes.
Good to see some action being taken. Now, staying in Nigeria but moving to Edo State, there's some conflict involving the governor and the neo-black movement.
That's right. Governor Monday Okpepolo has petitioned both the police and the DSS to arrest Olusegun East Kokor, who is the president of the Neo-Black Movement of Africa, or NBM.
On what grounds?
The petition alleges forgery of official government documents. These documents supposedly authorize renovation works in schools, within the Edo South Senatorial District.
Forgery of government documents. The governor called it a fraudulent and criminal assault, didn't he?
He did, yes.
Yeah.
Very strong words. And it seems some civil servants might be caught up in this too. They're under investigation for alleged connivance.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? The government took further action against the NBM?
No, it doesn't. They've revoked the land title for the NBM's headquarters in Edo State, citing alleged violent and unlawful activities.
Revoked the land title and demolished a building.
Yes, they demolished a building linked to their operations, claiming it was a hub for violent attacks. The government is also demanding transparency from the NBM about their claim of renovating 6 schools.
So a real crackdown. What's planned for the site where the building was demolished?
They plan to build a divisional police station there. Governor Akpopolo also made a point of denying any personal association with cult groups and stated the state's anti-cultism law is very much still in force.
Okay, quite a development there. Let's turn to an issue within Nigerian higher education, the crackdown on sex for grade.
Yes, this is a significant and troubling issue. Reports indicate that over 50 lecturers across public tertiary institutions have been indicted for sexual misconduct between April 2021 and April 2025.
50 lecturers. That's quite a number. Have there been consequences?
There have. Some have been dismissed outright, while others are facing disciplinary panels. These cases span universities and polytechnics all across the country.
This isn't exactly a new problem, is it? I recall surveys pointing this out before.
You're right. A 2018 survey highlighted just how widespread sexual harassment was in Nigerian higher education. There was a bill passed back in 2021 proposing a very stiff penalty, a 21-year jail term, but it hasn't actually been signed into law yet.
Not yet law, but institutions are taking action anyway.
Yes, recently we've seen dismissals, for example, at Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University and Lagos State University of Science and Technology. In many other institutions, Federal University Lokoja, Abuja State University, UNN, OAU, UNILAG, Uniport, Federal Poly Bauchi, Ignatius Ajuri University, Kwasoshu, River State's Aleki Amadi Poly, University of Abuja. They've all taken action against lecturers recently.
It seems there's momentum building. Is there talk about better ways for students to report this?
There is. Advocacy is growing for things like a digital anonymous feedback system, to create safer channels for reporting.
That seems crucial. Okay, let's shift gears now to international affairs, starting with China and Boeing.
Yes, some news on the trade front. China has reportedly lifted its ban that prevented domestic airlines from accepting new aircraft deliveries from Boeing.
Oh, that's interesting. Why the change?
It appears to follow an agreement between Beijing and Washington to temporarily lower tariffs on certain goods.
Linked to the trade tensions. Chinese airlines had stopped taking Boeing planes because of those tit-for-tat levies, right?
Exactly. The deal involves the U.S. lowering tariffs to 30% and China reducing theirs to 10%, but it's just for 90 days while negotiations continue.
90 days. U.S. President Trump called it a total reset.
He did. It's certainly a positive sign, especially for Boeing. They had planned to deliver around 50 aircraft to China this year, so this is significant for them.
Definitely. Now, turning to the Middle East, another incident in Gaza involving a hospital strike.
Yes, sadly. The Israeli military reported striking Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Gaza. They claimed it was housing Hamas militants.
A hospital strike. What's the Palestinian side saying?
Hamas has stated that the strike actually killed a journalist, Hassan Asley. They say he was wounded in a previous Israeli attack back on April 7th.
So, conflicting accounts. What's the Israeli justification for hitting the hospital?
The Israeli military claims that significant Hamas terrorists were operating from a command center within the hospital. They also made a specific allegation against the journalist, Asley, claiming he operated for Hamas under the guise of a journalist and even participated in the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel.
Very serious allegations against the journalist himself. Were others hurt in that previous strike he was wounded in?
Reports say 2 other journalists were killed in that April 7th bombing. The Committee to Protect Journalists has condemned this latest strike on the hospital.
And this happened after a brief pause in fighting?
Yes, there was a short pause for a hostage release, a U.S. Israeli citizen. But Israel resumed its offensive in Gaza back on March 18th.
The human cost continues to mount. Do we have updated casualty figures?
The initial October 7th attack resulted in 12,218 deaths in Israel. Since the fighting resumed in March, the death toll in Gaza is reported as at least 2,749, bringing the overall reported toll there to over 52,800.
Just devastating numbers. Meanwhile, U.S. President Trump is traveling.
Yes, he's arrived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This is his first multi-day foreign trip since returning to the White House.
Who met him there?
He was received by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The trip is expected to focus heavily on economic deals, the ongoing war in Gaza, and also Iran's nuclear program.
A packed agenda. Is he visiting other countries too?
Yes, stops in the UAE and Qatar are planned afterwards. While in Saudi Arabia, he's scheduled to attend a Saudi-U.S. investment forum and a summit with Gulf leaders.
Any specific deals expected? There was talk about nuclear technology.
There's speculation it could lead to an agreement on civilian nuclear technology cooperation with Saudi Arabia. On the investment side, Saudi Arabia has already announced plans to invest $600 billion in the U.S.
$600 billion.
And President Trump is reportedly going to ask them to increase that figure, perhaps aiming for around $1 trillion.
$1 trillion. That's ambitious. Is there any other potential travel related to conflict resolution?
There's a possibility he might also travel to Turkey. The idea is he could potentially join a meeting between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, if that comes together.
That would certainly be significant. Okay, let's look at the UK economy. Unemployment figures are out.
Yes, the UK unemployment rate has ticked up again. It reached 4.5% in the first quarter of the year, which is the highest level since August 2021.
4.5%. That's up from the previous quarter.
Slightly up from 4.4%. And this data actually precedes a UK tax hike and also the recent US tariffs we just discussed regarding China, so those impacts aren't reflected yet.
So it could potentially rise further. What else did the data show?
The number of employees on payroll actually fell in the first quarter. Wage growth has slowed a little bit, but it does remain relatively strong compared to historical levels.
What might this mean for interest rates?
Well, some analysts are suggesting this rise in unemployment might push the Bank of England towards cutting interest rates further, to stimulate the economy.
Something to watch. Now, concerning news about the United Nations finances.
Yes, very concerning. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has reported what he calls a dire financial strain on the organization.
Dire strain? What's the issue?
They're simply not receiving the money they're owed by member states. For the 2025 regular budget of $3.5 billion, they've only received $1.8 billion so far.
That's a huge shortfall. How much is outstanding overall?
Unpaid assessments total $2.4 billion for the regular budget. The U.S. owes the largest share, followed by China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Venezuela. And it's not just the regular budget.
Peacekeeping too.
Yes, the peacekeeping budget also faces a massive shortfall of $2.7 billion.
What's the UN planning to do?
Guterres is pushing for structural reforms, trying to cut costs, improve effectiveness. This could potentially mean staff reductions or relocating jobs to places where costs are lower.
But can reforms alone fix this?
He emphasized that they can't. The fundamental problem, he stressed, is the liquidity crisis caused by member states simply not paying their arrears. Reforms help, but they don't solve the core issue of unpaid dues.
A fundamental problem indeed. Finally, a very disturbing report from Amnesty International regarding Kenyan workers in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, this is a deeply troubling report. Amnesty International has detailed extreme abuse, racism, and exploitation faced by Kenyan women employed as domestic workers in Saudi Arabia.
Extreme abuse? What kind of things are detailed in the report?
The report, titled Locked In, Left Out, is based on the experiences of over 70 women. It documents cases amounting to forced labor and human trafficking.
Forced labor and trafficking? How were they trapped?
Many were deceived by recruitment agencies back in Kenya. Once in Saudi Arabia, they faced grueling conditions, often no days off, incredibly long hours, and their freedom severely restricted.
How was their freedom restricted?
Employers frequently confiscated their passports and phones, leaving them isolated and unable to seek help easily. Physical, verbal, and sexual abuse were reportedly common occurrences.
That's horrific. What about working conditions and pay?
Some women were forced to work over 16 hours a day for very low pay. Malnutrition and substandard living conditions were also reported.
And racism was mentioned.
Yes, pervasive racist slurs and dehumanizing treatment were frequently endured. Women reported being called monkeys and treated terribly.
Despite Saudi Arabia's reform efforts like Vision 2030.
Despite those reforms, domestic workers still lack full labor protections under the existing kafala system, which ties migrant workers' visas to their employers, leaving them highly vulnerable.
What is Amnesty calling for?
They're urging the Kenyan government to step up to better regulate recruitment agencies, and crucially, to provide more robust support for Kenyan workers who find themselves in distress in Saudi Arabia.
It really highlights the vulnerability of migrant domestic workers.
It certainly does. a stark reminder of the human cost that can be hidden behind these labor arrangements.
Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration of today's top news headlines for May 13th.
We've touched on quite a bit: security and governance in Nigeria, social issues there as well.
And internationally, developments in trade, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, economic indicators from the UK, challenges facing the UN, and critical human rights concerns.
We hope this overview, concise as we could make it, has given you some valuable insights into these key events shaping our world.
Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IMMC Radio and podcast.